can you tell your story? And that way we can kind of get a good feel of how we got here.
Got it. So I found out about my child support case 7 years after it opened. When I found out about it, I found about it on payday, ironically. HR gives me a call, say, hey, come see us. I go to HR. HR says, hey, we got an income withholding order. That was the first time I've ever heard that. It's like, what is an income withholding order? They said, well, they're going to start garnishing your checks effective immediately. I'm like, who's going to start garnishing my checks? And they said, child support. I'm like, child support? What do you mean child support? They said, well, here's a notice. I contacted child support. They said, well, yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. You had 6 months to respond, and it's been 7 years. And I'm like, 7 years? Like, what do you mean it's been 7 years? And she said, yeah, it's been 7 years. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. I then go down to the court, speak to the family law facilitator. They tell me the same thing. According to family code X, Y, and Z, there's been a default judgment. It's been 7 years. There's nothing that can be done. And that went on for another 13 years.
So, wow. All right, let's unpack the situation a little bit. So you found out that you had a child support case 7 years after it was filed, or
yes?
So the child support case was filed in 2000. Let's say you found out in 2007, 7 years after that, a child support case was filed, meaning that the child was already 7 years old at least.
Correct.
So you didn't even know you had a child.
So we got to take it back when you ask. So the child was conceived when I was 12 years old.
When you were 12?
When I was 12.
What year was this?
Okay. This was, at that time, it was 1992, 1991, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So it was a while ago. Yeah. So I was aware that a child was born. Again, I'm 12 years old at the time. I've always maintained, like, I never penetrated the woman. Like, I'm 12 years old. We don't know what we're doing. I know that she had a child, but here we go. Now it's 7 years after I turned 18. So I now just understand I'm 12. From 12 to 18, there's nothing. When I get to 18 to now, it's 7 years because they started
25, 25.
25, yeah.
Yeah. So they started the case as soon as when I turned 18 years old. So when 7 years after that, that's when I found out about the case.
Wow. So the child is a teenager.
Yes, at that point. Yeah.
And you had never seen a child before?
No, never.
So when you went to court, what happened?
So now here's the thing. When I went to court, there was no, I took them to court based on, in order to understand that. So look, I tell them, they start suspending my license. In order for me to keep my license, I had to enter into another agreement with them on top of the money that they already start taking. I'm paying them an additional $50 so I can keep my license. But every year my license got suspended. So for 13 years, we're doing this dance. And I contact them one day, my license gets suspended. I'm saying, hey, well, why do we keep going through this? It's like, I don't even know why I'm doing this anyway. This fraud. And the lady said, fraud? Like, what do you mean it's fraud? Like, you got served. And I'm like, wait, I got served? She said, yeah, well, you got served. I said, well, tell me what day I got served. She placed me on hold. She comes back. I'm sorry, Mr. Tillman. We do not have your signature. I said, before I can say anything, the lady says, but that don't matter anyway. You volunteered into the program. I said, I did what? She said, yeah, you volunteered the program. We had your signature. She placed me on hold, comes back and says, again, I'm sorry, Mr. Tillman, we don't have your signature. So from that point, I knew that they were supposed to serve me and that child support was voluntary. And they said that I volunteered into the program. So I just started doing research. What else are they supposed to do? So once I studied their procedures and that's in 45 CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulations, and 42 USC, United States Code, it has all of their guidelines there. So once I seen what they were supposed to do, I went to the court to get the documents that they filed against me in the very beginning to see if they follow their own procedures.
So, okay, you go through this procedure, but for the audience, is the child yours or not? Because that's going to be the number one thing everyone wants to know. Is the child yours or no?
No. So now here's the thing, even with that, I requested DNA testing. They told me that DNA testing could be done. I asked they said in order for DNA testing to be done at this point, it has to go through the woman. I submitted documents to her to take DNA testing. She declined the DNA testing. So what I did was I presented evidence, and then the courts actually said, well, wait a minute. At the time the child was conceived, he was 12 years old. This child may not have even been able to produce semen at that time. So there's no way possible that this child could have conceived another child at 12 years old, but the state just neglected this fact. So the courts ruled based on that I was not the father of the child.
So, okay. So you're from Compton, California. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So at 12 years old, you have intercourse with a girl who's 13 years old. She's a little older than you. Right?
I never penetrated her.
Just touched it.
I never penetrated her.
You lose contact. You keep in contact with her throughout the years or no?
No, I was 12 years old. She was my cousin's friend. I met her that same day.
So just all right. So you don't speak to her again.
No.
When you're 18, you don't know this, but she files child support on you.
No, she got cash aid, food stamps, and the benefits because she was a minor herself when she had the child.
Okay.
So when they do the cash aid, the food stamps, and the benefits, now they go after the non-custodial parent to repay this grant.
So it doesn't fall on the state.
And then you find out that when you're 25 that you got all of this back child support that you owe.
Correct. It was $24,000 in arrears at that point.
$24,000.
Yes. That they issued out. They didn't issue a full $24,000 to her. They add on a 10% compounded interest every year onto every dollar. So your dollars are having babies.
And it's not even your kid.
And it's not even my kid. But that we've seen it many times to where parents actually take DNA testing and find out that they're not the father, but they're
still obligated.
They're still the legal father because they created a parent-child relationship with that child, or they went through the process, or there was a default, and now they're deemed the legal father.
Yeah. I know somebody who's like in New York, I believe it's like 2 years. You have 2 years to contest that you're not the father. And if you pay child support, and then like let's say in year 3 you find out that you're not the father, you still got to pay child support for the remaining.
You're the legal father.
So all right. So from an educational standpoint, when you're going through this like journey of educating yourself on the child support system, what's some of the things that you found out that nobody is aware of when it comes to child support?
First, I found out that child support is voluntary. Let's just start there. You have to consent in order to participate in this program. The consent, it's a contract. There has to be, what are the fundamentals of a contract? There have to be offer and acceptance. They send out a summons, and in order for them to start the actual case, you must be given notice of once you establish paternity, they have to provide both parents notice by audio, putting on some headphones, watching a video, or someone literally telling you what are the legal consequences of establishing voluntary paternity. What are the legal consequences? License suspensions, passports, income withholding orders, all of these things. The 45 CFR 303.5 says that at a minimum, they must do these things. If they do not, then paternity was never established.
For anyone because you've had the internet on fire the last 6 months, why do you say that child support is fraud?
Child support is fraud because they don't follow their own procedures. There's something called the separation of powers. And this is not my opinion. This is fact. There's a Supreme Court case law called Holmberg versus Holmberg, where child support services was found guilty of violating the separation of powers. What is the separation of powers? There's 3 branches of government: judicial, legislative, and executive branch. If you participate in one branch of government, you cannot participate in the other branch of government. But somehow child support was able to create their own family codes. That's legislative. They enforce their own child support orders and modify them. That falls under the executive branch, and they find you guilty or have a hearing in their own child support administrative hearings, which is they're participating in the judicial branch, even though they are administrative, and that they have been found guilty of violating the separations of powers. And when they said it's also unconstitutional, so anything that conflicts with the United States Constitution, any state statute or any state constitution that conflicts with the United States Constitution is null and void, because the United States Constitution and Supreme Court case law is the supreme law of the land.
So, okay, child support. I did some research. $32 billion was collected in 2021 in child support, right? So it's obviously business is booming these days. For sure.
To say the least.
To say the least,
right? And it's one of these things that I don't think no one's ever prepared. If you've ever been put on child support, it's like getting punched in the back of the head. You don't. There's no.
You don't see it coming.
You don't see it coming. They just give you the paper. You've been served, like Nick Cannon. So for somebody that's in that situation, right? And I don't want to make this. I don't want, because it's a very sensitive topic, and a lot of women. There's a lot of deadbeat dads out there, right?
True. Facts.
Yes.
So what would be your advice? Let's start for men that have just been served and they about to go through the process. And then what's your advice for women who actually have a legitimate case, have a father who's not doing anything, and they're going through the process?
Got it. Well, so first, I'm not an attorney, so I can't provide legal advice, just my experience dealing with child support. First, if a person was served with child support, the very first thing that I did was, once I found out what they were supposed to do, I went down to the clerk's office. I obtained copies of the summons, the complaint, the proof of service. I had a default judgment and the actual order, because that's what a remedy is. In order for child support to move forward, and this case to be valid, those documents have to be filed correctly. It has to be under the seal of the court and signed by the clerk thereof. That's 28 USC 1691. The person also has to be served. If they're not served correctly within 3.5 years, there's a Supreme Court case law called County of San Diego versus Gorham, where it says that judgment is void and it's a nullity, past, present, and future. Anything that comes through it and anything flows out of it is void. As far as on the women's side, I don't advocate for parents to not take care of their children. I just challenge the child support system to make sure that it follows its own procedures. I said it many times. I absolutely 1000%. If a man or woman is not taking care of their children, they 1000% need to be on child support. They need to be on. That's just what I am. Is no way around it. If that person is not taking care of their responsibility, they need to be on child support. And how does that happen? A person can go down to child support services and start a case. And it's a crazy, there's no checks and balances there, because I was actually in the child support office with my phone, and a young lady walks in and say, "Hey, I want to start a child support case." The very first thing that comes out the receptionist's mouth is, "You got a social security number?" That is a crime. You cannot give someone's social security number without their consent.
Then how do you do a claim then if you can't give your social security number?
Well, you can provide any information, because they have services on the, because
they track it. They track
exactly.
it.
Yeah, they'll check on that.
Contracted with the Social Security Administration, the hospitals, the birth records agencies. So once they get enough information, they can go on the back end, and they can use their services to locate that person. But I can't just give you Ian's social security number and say, "Hey, that you just can't do that."
For the fellas that didn't have your expertise when they signed their agreements, do you have any advice for men that are currently on child support to get modifications, or do you counsel in any way to help them that may be paying a little bit too much or may want to get some modifications in their current child support case?
So modifications, it's a tricky thing, because anybody, in order to get a modification, there has to be a significant change in circumstances. So just say Rashad is on child support and he says, okay, I lost my job. I go down to the court to get a modification. I lost my job. So what they're going to look and say, okay, well, Mr. Rashad, you made in 2023, you made $80,000. You have the
a day.
You have the you have the potential to make that $80,000 a day. So therefore, you don't qualify for a modification. You have the potential to make. So it doesn't matter that the fact that you lost your job, that doesn't matter. But the thing is, when a modification, is also part of consent, because you're asking a modification, a motion, you're recognizing the court's authority and you're giving them jurisdiction over you. They have something very tricky. It's something called a general appearance. That says for when a person walks into that courtroom for any reason that recognizes the court's authority, you're giving them jurisdiction over you, and the jurisdiction challenge is waived. You're waiving all your rights. To combat that, a person has to go in there and say, I'm not making a general appearance or making something called a special appearance, which now a lot of states are trying to pull back from special appearance because it's costing them money.
So, all right, child support, it almost ruined your life, right? You got out of that, but owing $25,000 at 24, that could potentially ruin your life. And the story, it wasn't your kid. What's some of the worst stories that you've heard? I'm sure a lot of people reach out to you. What's some of the worst stories? Because I want to. This is important for people to understand, right? Because a lot of people don't have sympathy for people that's paying child support, or they're like, "Look, you made the baby. It's on you. I don't want to hear about it." They had never been through the system. Going through the child support system, it's like the bullpen. Like you with the riffraff. Like you with the riffraff.
Yeah, for real.
With the riffraff. It's like if you are a real person that is like, a real responsible person, it's humiliating. It's actually very humiliating to actually have to.
It's demoralizing.
So I want to I think this is important for people to kind of have a different framework. So can you told your story, but paint a picture of how child support can ruin somebody's life.
How child support can ruin somebody's life. So the first story that comes to my mind is a young lady, and we had this conversation, and I posted it last year. It was a female. She had sole custody of her kids. Her ex-husband went and got on the county and said that he has the kids. They started a child support case against her, and they start garnishing her checks, even though the children lived with her. He lived in a whole nother county. She had to go and fight to prove that the kids resided with her. And she never got served. They said that they served her at her home. Her employer came to the hearing and said that she was at work on this day. And they said, well, that doesn't matter. It's insufficient because the process server certified under penalty of perjury that they served you at your home. So they wanted to modify it to 0. And, just from the education that I provided and my One Credit guy provided, she was like, look, I don't want no modification. I want it actually dismissed. So they end up dismissing her case. But these are some of the horror stories. To one guy, he was put on child support at 5 years old.
What?
I bullcrap you not.
Oh, what?
When you look at his original summons, it has his birthday saying he was been on child support since he was 5 years old. Now, obviously, this was a clerical mistake, but they have it on his record that he's been on child support since 5 years old, and they've been charging him, and they will not correct it at all. People that have been incarcerated said that they were served personally where they was in the feds. One of my guys, he just got his case dismissed in December. He was on child support for 23 years, suspended his license, bank levies, all of these things. He was incarcerated when they said that they actually served him personally. He went in, he took one of my master classes. We looked at they dismissed his case after 23 years. Even in my situation, the process server said that they served me, which I later proved they served me at a vacant house. The house was vacant. I had to subpoena Los Angeles County Department of Water and Power to come testify on my behalf. So I made LA County testify against LA County to say, look, on this date at this time, we didn't even have no service there. They don't care. Why? Because they get incentivized on the back end. So what was the number?
Well, what are the incentives? 33 billion?
32 billion. 32 billion. Yeah, 32.7.
But was that the incentives, or is that just the money that they collected?
That's the money they collected.
So, but here's the thing. On top of that, based on their performance, is 42 USC 658A incentive payments to states. The states get incentivized on the back end based on their performance on how much they collect child support. They get an actual kickback. So how can you get a fair trial under due process in a state here where the states are getting a kickback based on their performance to put you on child support in the first place? How?
It's almost like a mutual fund.
Come on now.
Yeah, to keep the entitlements off the state. In your opinion, is child support fair for the child? I know a lot of men often have a complaint that, well, I pay child support, but most of it isn't going to my kid. What insight or advice do you have for the men that feel that?
Well, and this is not even my opinion. I just stick straight to the facts. There's a Supreme Court case, and I hate to be the Supreme Court case law guy, but it's there. It's a Supreme Court case law called Blessing versus Freestone. Well, 5 women from Arizona their children were on a county, and they were only getting a small portion of the money. And they're like, well, where is all the money going? My husband or my ex said they take in thousands and thousands, but I'm only getting hundreds. Where's all the money going? Yeah. Child support said, look, that's not your money. That's our money. They actually told on themselves to keep the money. So they said in Blessing versus Freestone, child support services themselves said child support was never intended to benefit the child nor the custodial parent. It was intended to benefit the state. In that case, they also said that there's no entitlement to child support. There's no constitutional right to child support at all. So this is not my opinion. This is fact. These are all researchable, Googleable facts. You can find it.